We're at 10 a.m. So I will open us up with a yeah. Okay. Tuia ke runga, tuia ke raro, tuia ke waho, tuia ke roto, tuia ki te tangata, ka rongo te pou, ka rongo te au, haumie, uie, aia. Alrighty. We have an apologies from Chair Robertson, for the first hour. And I believe that's the only apologies that we do have. No public forum or anything. So I will just move that we confirm the agenda as you have it. I think someone would like to second that. Councillor Somerville. All in favour? All against? Motion carries. And then we have the minutes from the 22nd of May that are in there in the report. If someone would like to move that those are confirmed as a true and accurate record. Councillor Forbes and we have Councillor McCall to second that. All in favour? All right. All against? Motion carries. And so that is passed. We don't have any open actions. And so we'll move on to 9.1, where we have Yellow and Co. coming up to tell us, to give us an update on the REG group activities. I'll let you guys take us away for that.
Oops.
Oh dear.
Great. Good morning, everybody. So this report is just an overview of the activities of the Consents, Compliance, Harbour Master and Regulatory Data teams for the last financial year. So just the report provides an outline of the continued high level of work across the teams for the financial year. And just thought I'd highlight a few of the key numbers and work areas for the teams. So there was a huge amount of work on our public inquiries. So over 2,300 of those were handled through the consents team. We graded over 7,000 performance monitoring returns, so that's a bit of information from consent holders. We completed 1,400 on-site audits and inspections, responded to 1,300 pollution requests, and responded to major incidents on our harbour and waterways. So a lot of activity within the teams, and just happy to take questions on anything within the paper.
Cool. Do we have any questions around the table on that? I'll give Councillor Somerville.
Yeah, thanks. Look, thank you for this. I was just looking at that section about 15 to 17 about appeals, and reviews, and I see there have been none on decisions in that period. I just wondered how that compared with historically. That is, in the past, have we had lots of investment, and now we haven't had any?
So there's kind of two parts to this area. The first being on 15, objections to consent decisions. So that's where we've granted or declined an application. That's the objection to that decision, and that is consistently low, if not none, over the past few years. The next one down is 16, and that's cost objections, and we do tend to get a couple of those, and the two that we received in the financial year is quite similar to years past, if not lower.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Councillor Wilson.
I think in coming to this is better done elsewhere. I'm talking about commercial forestry inspections. I attended the meeting in Lawrence yesterday, which was very interesting and very well run. We think where many of the highlights in the OT it wasn't the focus. It was a good way of getting the community. One of the real issues is people understanding what the commercial forestry rules actually require of old and existing forests, and translating that. Now, I went onto the website to think, is there something under forestry, but I couldn't quite find it, except for it took me to the NES. And the question I've got is, would it assist people understanding, in order to make complaints or to understand how forestry is used, to understand those setbacks and when they would apply? And but the question, and have we got any work in that space happening?
Is it like an FAQ on these?
Well, yeah, and what it looks like, because I don't even know what date that took effect, but there is obviously a setback in there for boundaries that won't be, it's what happens to something that was a carbon forest but is now a commercial forest, and understanding those things, because they are people want to know, and it's really hard to translate that in.
Yeah, and it's certainly something we can look at doing. We had focused on things that require consents, and we do have some compliance information about activities, but we can certainly, yes, there will be value in that, and yes, we can look into doing that on our website.
And the only other question, again, that came out of this meeting yesterday, and I don't necessarily want to take it too far, but the pest management, is that one of the things that is triggered in the NES? Yes, no.
Off the top of my head, no, I don't think so. I think that comes under other requirements, but not
Yeah.
sure of the answer to that.
Thank you.
Do we have any other, Councillor Noon?
You ready for a left field question?
Always.
No, it does relate to the paper joke. So under paragraph 21, it's just about your public inquiries, service, etc. And it mentions the under E from a fast track improvement bill. So does the bill that was established during COVID, does this bill sort of plug into that one, or does it supersede that bill or not? I could probably Google that, but I'm sure you.
No, I can be your Google. It supersedes it, so it'll be a brand new bill, but it kind of builds on, for lack of a better term, what was already done.
Yeah, and once it goes through, we can provide an overview of what that is and what our processes are. Yeah.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions on the table? Yeah, Councillor Malcolm.
On page 10, we've just, and yeah, there's clearly a lot happening. We're saying we've done 141% of our planned activity. So we've budgeted on doing so many visits, but you've done at 141%. So how do you balance that out for next year? Or is in fact 141% of what you planned the best space to be in for monitoring?
I think one comment around that, Councillor, is we had a very successful dairy inspection program this season, which really pushed the numbers up. And so we had a number of staff targeted in that. We have had some staff changes that might affect that program slightly next year. Broadly, you know, there's a balance there between when you're going out to do a field inspection, it can be something very complicated that takes a very long time, and often those are the higher risk activities. Or we can go through certain activities like coastal structures where you can churn out the numbers very quickly, and your percentages look very good, but actually they're relatively simple inspections. We're prioritising our inspections based on the compliance policy, and you're right, there is a balance there, but always looking at conducting the right level of inspections, and we're very happy with that, but it is largely a difference in dairy inspections that have pushed it up this year.
So if I take that back to 100%, that you've budgeted to do so many of each different type, are you comfortable that 100% will give you the correct amount of monitoring to ensure we're on target, that things are compliant?
I'll answer this
Sorry.
one. Yes, no, that's all right. Simon's happily filling in as our acting compliance manager at the moment, and he's doing a wonderful job. Yes, we are. And when we brought those new targets up to the committee last time, there was some questions about those, and we do know that because of workload and what's going on, that 100% is more likely and is sitting where we were hoping to achieve. So 141% was an amazing year and an amazing effort, but 100% is realistic and has been what is work programmed.
Good, Scott. Thank you.
Councillors.
Thank you. I love the digital way, or the GIS way we're presenting this information, and well done. And it's obviously a lot of background stuff in there, so congratulations to the team for being able to do that. Having seen all of those consents, and with that comes a whole lot of monitoring information as well, which I presume is after we've changed over in our computer systems means that we have a much better way of tracking what is actually being used as opposed to consented, and when it comes to water use. Is that correct?
I think there's a two-part answer there. I mean, we were always able to track it, but I think that the data is more accessible now. We've moved into new systems, so we always had the information, but it could be difficult to access in the old system. But also, over time, if we're talking about water use in particular, you're seeing improvements to metering out there. You're seeing that the national telemetry rules coming in, so the quality of that data is getting better year on year.
I'm just interested in how we could be using that data as a policy setting or understanding before we set policy potentially for some rules, and is it at a granular level that we can see, compare it to the weather and how wet the season is, that we can see how much water is being used? Because you know, you have an irrigation tank for the dry seasons, but you may not be using it in the wet seasons, and just understanding what that picture looks like. Is that easy to get on mass?
I don't know if easy is the word I would use, but
Okay.
it is an achievable thing. We do have, we have each water meter's individual take. The complexity with consents comes into, one water meter might link to multiple consents and one links to one consent. And people share water meters. And so at an individual compliance level, a staff member can look at that and unpick the way the consents fit together. When you start trying to aggregate that together, there's some risk that you make some mistakes in there. For example, if someone's taking a mixture of company water, so retake water and run of the river water, our staff members looking at that will work that out. But if you're adding the two together, it's going to look like that's all coming out of the river. So there are some complexities there and trying to do that. And obviously the bigger the catchment, the harder that gets. There's also a risk there around, we don't quality assure the water meter data.
No.
So we take the data as it comes in and assess that for compliance. And sometimes we go back to the consent holder and say, hey, you might want to resend this, it looks wrong. But you can get spikes in there and things like that would, a staff member looking at it's going to go, look, they didn't really take 100 times what they normally take. That's a data error. But if you're just aggregating it might not show up.
I suppose having an understanding of how that is working, I'll probably just later, but even picking some as an average and seeing how it's working. Yeah, thank you.
I'll go to Brian and then myself.
Cool, thank you. I just flicked to the offence descriptions and enforcement offences, figure 18, page 31. There was significant non-compliance with forestry, there was significant non-compliance with dairy and in other fields. If I was a lay person and wanted to get a feel of where the offences were falling, whether they were in forestry, from a prosecution perspective, how would I do that? I see that the table on page 31, the RMA sections, I can sort of read them and interpret, sort of get there was a reference there to a wastewater treatment plant discharge. How would I get a feel of, have the significant non-compliance in dairy and forestry led to prosecutions, or what prosecutions are actually happening in a particular field?
Yeah, so I guess we don't, in our current reporting, link those offences back to the original, whether they were from a consent or from dairy or forestry, and often it's because it's a mixture. The first thing I do is direct the lay people to the graphs which show the, I'm just looking for the figure number, sorry, the figure 15 and figure 13, which show the long-term trends or the trends over 2 years in terms of how those areas are doing in terms of compliance. Prosecutions, as it comes to it, inevitably end up in the paper, but we don't proactively publish them while they're underway.
Yeah, and just refer to paragraph 56 of the report itself is also where there's information. So we've got the graphs and then also the text within the report. So prosecutions within the 23-24 year related to outdoor burning, fire storage and waterway disturbance. And there's also various ones underway in terms of the court process. So where we can provide that information, we do, and we've had that request from councillors around the table, and the reporting is there on that basis. But again, with it being the end of our reporting year, we'll take a look at our graphs and see what more we can do. But that information is in there, but we'll look to see how we can make that even further accessible within the bounds of what we can publicly display, depending on where something is in the court process.
Yeah, I do wonder whether at the end of the year, as you've said, there could be some consideration to, in the wrap up and say that there are all the compliance information, but at the end of the day, in dairy farming, none led to a prosecution, or there were 3 prosecutions, same with forestry, outdoor burning, all these particular areas. So just from a communication and an understanding perspective.
Yeah, happy to tweak how that's currently written into the report.
Yeah.
So yeah, but it is there, but we'll tweak it for the ones moving forward.
Thank you.
I was just going to ask in paragraphs 31 and 36 about the dairy and forestry compliance. Were there any like specific reasons we doubled the forestry and quadrupled almost the dairy? Was that just a general scaling up of that sort of compliance regulatory activity?
So I think
Something.
dairy farms first, we risk assess dairy farms to look at the frequency we're going out to them, but there's an aim to get to all of them every 2 to 3 years. Last year's program was probably a little bit lower than we wanted, so this year was right staff in the right place and a chance to catch up. Forestry, that'll be related to, so forestry really varies depending on what activity is going on out there. It's around harvest notification, so it'll be us reacting to high risk harvest sites, and it'll be around the number of notifications coming in.
Thanks, that's really helpful. Councillor Moon and then Paul.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Paragraph 9, it talks about the various consents and the activities that they relate to. And then I go to figure 3, which shows the spread between those main activities. And I see consent transfer and wetlands, coloured line, but they're both blue. And then I think, okay, there's certainly X amount of wetland activities. So are you able to just give us a bit of an idea in terms of numbers that relate to wetland applications? Just a
So there's none on there.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so the figure 3 is actually all consent transfers.
oh,
Yeah, which is not overly clear with the colours.
Yeah, the wetlands is like a lighter blue and the transfers are a darker blue, so that might be something we look at with our colour coding moving forward. So apologies for that one.
thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just following up from the Chair's question before around the consents for dairy and forestry. I've done a couple of numbers there. So we're talking page 11, number 31. A couple of numbers after that. So in dairy, I have got a question at the end, but basically it looks like we've inspected 407 of, according to Mr. Google, that's 440 dairy farms in Otago. So that's an awesome effort. Which is 92% of the farms. Of those, we found that there was 2% significantly non-compliant. 2% is significantly non-compliant, and there's another 4% that are moderately non-compliant. And on the forestry, there was 94 management plans submitted, of which I believe 53 were inspected, which is 56% of the opportunity to look at. 2 of those were significantly non-compliant, which is 4%, and significant and moderate non-compliant was 11.5%. So what I've read into that is that the compliance record of forestry is twice as bad as dairy. Okay, percent basis. Then we go to the numbers on page 26, the graphs, which are the 2 graphs showing the compliance from one year to the next. So there's a clear trend there that the dairy compliance criteria are improving. So there's a lot more in the green and less in the red. And there's also a clear trend of forestry compliance declining. So we're getting less being fully compliant and more being either moderate or significantly non-compliant, should we be concerned that the forestry industry is having a declining trend of compliance as opposed to the dairy farming industries who seem to be in a pretty comfortable spot?
No, we're always very pleased when we see compliance from any activity and any party, and we want to move people to that point. There are different rules covering both activities and different numbers of inspections and different situations to apply. So I wouldn't want to be reaching that conclusion based solely off those numbers. Certainly where we are not seeing compliance, we want people to move into that compliance space and we'll focus on those activities. But yeah, that is what the percentages are telling us, but there's a lot that goes into the background of those numbers and different roles.
Yeah, it was just follow up on that.
Yeah, just
McCall.
Yeah.
Just Brian, if you could just.
Yeah, and also that there's been a change in forestry rules as well.
I think that's quite quite important to note too. We've had a change in the NES 1 year to the next, so there's that always comes with a period of time for us to work alongside those companies to just ensure we're all on the same page as to what the requirements of that new NES commercial forestry is, and that would naturally lead to a dip in compliance as different standards are applied. So I think that the focus on forestry is a good one, and there's good engagement. But I would be cautious reading that between 22, 23, 23, 24, when there's been a new NES introduced in that period. I think the key thing will be keeping an eye on that over the next couple of years as the NESCF becomes bedded in to ensure that the right response from those companies has been applied and we start to see it trending upwards.
Cool.
Yeah, thank you. Just a quick follow-up. Do you think that we may have increased emphasis on forestry compliance in light of these numbers?
So part of it will be through our work program and the risk-based approach that we've taken for our priorities for compliance. So forestry is one of those activities that is in that plan, and we will need to revisit, how we monitor and what we focus on once we have any new rules from the Land and Water Plan. So as Richard has said, the NES has changed and we are engaging with them around forestry activities, but at this moment in time, we're just sticking to our current work program.
Thank you for that. And just a quick comment. I always enjoy these reports because they're really easy to read and nice to understand. So thank you very much for your whole team.
Thanks. Councillor Methven.
Just following up on that line of questioning around forestry, I guess the question I had with the non-compliance was that large operators. I mean, we've got farm lots now that fall into these sort of categories. So, I mean, the assumption that it's large forestry operators that are non-compliant is sort of assumed, but there are farm lots involved in forestry now too. So, is there? Do you know who's non-compliant? Is it the big commercial foresters or is it the farm lots?
So not off the top of my head. When the management plans come in and they're coming in for any harvesting, we're assessing them for risk. And that includes looking at the compliance history of the operator that's undertaking the felling. So we'll factor that into whether we need to go out and look or not. So it'll be a range of those operators from large operators to smaller farm lots who have been checked. But I couldn't tell you off the top of my head, I'm sorry, the non-compliances.
Okay. Did we have any other? Yeah, Councillor Laws.
I was to take you to
Mike.
Michael. Which one did I use this one?
Didn't recognise.
Very good. Sorry. If I was to take you to figure 11. And I just want to see that I'm reading it right. Of the audits that you do, 50% of them fail. Is that right? For the year 23-24.
Yeah, 50% have some form of non-compliance. I'd be careful wording that as failing, because low risk non-compliance can be something that's just as technical as you sent in your reports late. It doesn't mean you're causing environmental damage.
Okay, then that doesn't tell me what I need to know, does it? Because on the basis of your answer now, that's misleading, that paragraph, that particular. Because as I look at that, 50% of you've audited and 50% have been found non-compliant. Now you've just said, oh, well, some of that's technical. Now, which is it? Are these serious breaches of non-compliance or not? I'm sorry, an oral response, oh, it might be technical, isn't really a response. Do we have a problem? Because if I'm reading that, we've got a problem and it's getting worse.
So
I'll just say the graph is the graph. We've got 50% that don't meet full compliance with
Right.
everything within the consent.
Yep.
Just referring to paragraph 28 of the report, which talks about the consent audit process. We give them a grade, and that grade is set out in the compliance policy. And a large number of our consents, you'll note, fall into that low risk non-compliance, which is effectively a technical non-compliance, but it is still a non-compliance. It still prevents them from being considered fully compliant. The key thing we're looking for is is that non-compliance likely to lead to a poor environmental outcome? And if that's the case, we wouldn't consider them to be in that low risk non-compliance. So the explanation for those categories is we do try and point out that at the end of 28, greater non-compliance, low risk. But your statement of 50% or just over 50% are not fully compliant is correct. That's the outcome of our audit process.
Okay, but if I then look at, okay, so what you're suggesting to me is that the 33%, and that's a very high number, that 33% of them are technically non-compliant, which means that you report it as such, both publicly and to us at the governance table, Richard. But you almost ask the question, why are you reporting at all if you say it's not a problem, which is essentially what you're saying. Yeah.
It's not that it's not a problem. It's in our assessment, it doesn't produce an immediate risk to the environment.
Okay, but nonetheless, why are they so many? A third of all the consents technically non-compliant, and that's getting worse, that figure, not better.
Yeah, I mean, my assessment, and Joan Simon can jump in, and although she's changed roles, Tammy can jump in as well based on her experience. The consents that we grant are highly technical in nature, large reporting requirements, numerous dates by which things have to be provided, operating manuals, all of those things. It's the nature of regional council consents, quite different to my experience with TLA consents. And that can lead to, as an example, a report being received late is a technical non-compliance. They haven't met the requirement within that consent for supplying a report by a particular date. We must assess that as non-compliant, but that in itself doesn't necessarily mean there is an issue. It will be assessed, and maybe there are other issues, but we do have, in an ideal world, we would shift those low risk non-compliance into the fully compliant category by working with them to establish can we grant consents in a manner that makes things simpler, so aligning dates for reporting and things during the year, rather than having a different report every couple of months. So there's things we can do at that end, and then just sitting down and working through that program, reminder letters if things are coming up. So there's things we can do to try and tip them into fully compliant. But based on the nature of the consents we issue, it lends itself to reasonably large numbers, as you can see, of those technical non-compliances.
Which leads you to the next conclusion. Either the IRC is inefficient because it is in actual fact got such strict conditions that a third of the audit compliances are going to fail. Or alternatively, out there is a sort of laissez-faire attitude because it's so bloody technical anyhow, who the hell cares? Now, either way, I would suggest to you that's a problem, because you shouldn't be having any list of non-compliance if it's a simple process that people can follow. And what that tells me is, and your answer just now, we don't have a simple process that everybody can follow.
Look, I think consent compliance is a relatively simple process.
You do?
Yep. I mean, you get a consent, it has conditions, it has requirements, they should be met. If someone was to submit a report regularly late over a number of years, then that might be escalated to a higher level of non-compliance. So there are ways in which we can manage that, but in my mind, we should always be aiming to grant consents that enable compliance and that around aligning dates and ensuring clarity on what it is that's being asked for. But ultimately, the responsibility sits with the consent holder to meet the requirements of their consent. It's a well-established process.
Okay, that which leads me to the next conclusion though. I'm also looking at the orange bar.
Just checking it's a question.
Sorry? Yeah, no, it's the same question. I'm looking at the orange bar and the red bar there. They are much larger in total numbers, I assume, and proportions than both dairying and forestry by comparison. And the orange bar is designated as moderate non-compliance.
Yes.
So what's the definition of moderate non-compliance if technical non-compliance leads me into a third of those?
We will find that, but we'll pull it up as defined in the compliance plan policy.
A definition of threshold moderate non-compliance. Cool. Were there any other questions there, or should we can go?
No, it's just that I've noticed again that those numbers are going up. So if you look at dairying and forestry, you'd actually look at the graphs and the numbers and say, oh, it's generally okay, and you're monitoring it and people are getting the message. So it must be in other areas of your consents that those figures are such as to produce this disproportionate number of non-compliant monitoring or audits.
So the definition of moderate non-compliance is non-compliance with some of the relevant consent conditions, plan rules, regulations and national environmental standards where there are some environmental consequences and or there is a moderate risk of adverse environmental effects.
So that's quite a lot really, again, isn't it? Because it's almost at 1 in 5 is either moderate or significant after the audits. And your problems aren't forestry and dairy, they're something else. What are they? What are the areas that are presenting as a risk factor for you?
I'll just check for a breakdown because we do have one. One thing I wanted to add though is that the figure you're looking at should be read in conjunction with figure 8. Figure 8 represents the desktop monitoring we do, and then we use the results of that to try and target the audits at the consents that need to be looked at in the field. So you'll see a higher compliance in figure 8, and there will be a number of consents that are low risk that go through that process that comply with all their reporting requirements, therefore are less likely to be audited. So you would expect to see, if we're doing our job properly and targeting correctly, you would expect to see more non-compliances in the field audits. And figure 8 also shows that there is a higher rate of compliance from consents generally being checked.
Nevertheless, if forestry and dairy are doing their bit, and that's what these figures are showing in the main, what's the problem area, please, where when you do the audits, there are environmental degradation as a consequence?
Might have to come back to you on that one, councillor. We do have the numbers, but not at my fingertips.
Yeah, it's good. So we report in figure 12 on this, make sure it's right, the red band. But I think we can, based on your question, can add in that orange band.
Yeah.
In terms of the types of
Oh, we can,
consents
yes.
that are being graded moderate as well as significant.
Yeah, so we'll have that for the next review.
So I'll come back to you on a few of those things then, councillor Laws, just checking any other questions, then I'll go to councillor Malcolm. I think.
So you just a wee bit more on that one. So your moderate non-compliance, where you're saying about environmental effects, is the definition likely to cause environmental effect or has caused environmental effects? Because that's quite different.
So it says where there are some environmental consequences and or there is a moderate risk of adverse environmental effects.
Yes. So in fact, nothing may have happened, but you can see that potentially if that didn't get fixed up, that would happen. Yeah. So
You need a breakdown of both really, wouldn't you?
So there's a table with colours and the
Yes.
wording, and I can make sure that's
Yeah,
circulated, and we can include that in our reports moving forward too as well.
So just going on from that, Joe, we're doing really good work, and I could probably quote an example of an irrigation report that comes in that was significantly out, and the flow that this crowd had taken was about 400 times more than they were allowed to take, but it was a malfunction. So that water taker was then as non-compliant, low risk non-compliant, because it was a technical error. So I think it's actually quite important that we do, because this will get reported on, but so we want to paint the true picture, and I do take Councillor Laws's work that we could perhaps have to do some more on defining our brackets, because if we're not, I don't see it as a problem, because I think everyone's doing things really, really working hard in most areas, but we need to show, would it be correct, CE, because that's going to be a question, that we need to show that we're working with people to ensure that the process is good and we're doing the right things around it. So perhaps we need to do something to tweak that somewhere.
Sorry, and Richard, we do have our annual compliance report that will do all of that. Yeah.
So the quarterly reports are
Snapshot.
in time to ensure that governance can monitor the progress of our regulatory teams. The annual report, which we introduced last year and it's an annual thing, funnily enough, means that you will get an overview of what the results of the compliance room that you signed off the year before were in that year, and also some context, which I think you're right is important. And we can't capture all that context in these, although I think that the expanding on the orange bracket in terms of what is causing that moderate non-compliance in terms of our risk areas is something. But in terms of starting to explain that context, it does link back to our policy and our compliance plan, and then we wrap that up in the annual report, which will come through to summarise everything and provide a bit more context to the work that's gone on.
Good. Ever improving. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Kelleher and then Councillor Lawson.
Thank you. It's actually honing in on quite a key point. And would it be fair to say that actually there is potentially an issue with how we issue consents and the conditions that are attached to the consent? Because what I observed with having observed many consents is that there are always conditions that are totally specific to the consent activity. And then there are conditions that you're left scratching your head as to, well, why on earth are they there? But you've been through such a torturous process that you just accept them because they're there. But often they are quite left field and create, and I can list off quite a few, but this is a question. So maybe this situation, could it be fair to say that it's highlighting that maybe what we need to be doing is reviewing the consents and the conditions attached to them?
No, I don't think there is a significant issue with the consents team and the consents that they issue, or a need to review them. Obviously, I work very closely with the consents team on it. We always ensure we're appropriate that consent conditions relate to the activity that is being authorised and the rule that they are applied under. There is case law that directs us to do that, and we do give applicants opportunity to review those consent conditions. As Richard has said, where we have found that there are things that could line up better, say as reporting dates or requirements, we work to improve that, and that is part of those process improvements that we report through to here. Do appreciate that people have had different experiences through our consenting process, but I have full confidence in the work that the consents team does.
I think the two biggest process steps that give me confidence that that's not the case here. One is that all of the conditions that have been subject to reviews prior to some of the historical consents, which possibly did have some conditions that I think even from our point of view in terms of how we enforce them were challenging. That's not the case. There's a standard set of conditions. And the other one is the ability for an applicant to review those conditions and provide feedback before a consent's granted. And that's quite an important step, because it enables some discussion around, is it really necessary, and do we both understand what it's asking for? And so that building that step into the process ensures that there can be a conversation, because once it's issued, as we know, it becomes much harder to amend things.
Mr. Lang, sorry.
In regard to the 1,411 audits and inspections, are any of them, all of them, or none of them cost recoverable, or how do you budget or finance that work?
So consent audits are cost recoverable. The dairy program is covered by a targeted rate. And forestry,
I don't know that one off the top of my head, but dairy is a targeted rate and the others are cost recoverable based on time or a fixed fee.
Alrighty, did we have any other questions around the table? Otherwise I'll get someone to move those you'll move. Alrighty, does anyone want to second those recommendations? That's just to note this report. Alright, we've got Councillor Somerville there. That's moved and seconded. Would anyone like to have any discussion on the recommendations?
I'd just like to congratulate a presentation report and the work the staff do, but also the community who are generally abiding by and getting very good environmental results. It's a great story. And the low technical breaches will put that picture much better, and they're often not of the people involved anyway. So, you know, I think it's a really good picture story. It's why we've got a good environment. Thank you.
Cool. Definitely a big thanks team on this one. Alright, I will put the motion. All in favour? All against? Motion carried. Thanks. And now we will move on to 9.2. We'll be discussing the consent fee fund. We also have Alex, and I'm not sure that Joe's saying with us.
Yes, I'm staying. So this paper just provides an overview of applications that were funded by Council's Fee Support Fund. So that's where, if consent is required, the processing fees will be covered if the consent is for environmental benefit or community group, or it meets the criteria within the policy. So just overviewing that there were 9 applications that received funding, none were declined. And this is part of the work that the consent team really enjoys in terms of engaging with these groups and seeing these projects go through the process. We have just recommended some very minor changes to the policy just to reflect new job titles, and that's noted in the report as well. So really happy to take questions about any applications or the policy, but yeah, just a really positive piece of work that has happened over the last financial year.
Awesome. So that was read. And then Councillor Scott.
Cool. Yeah, look, it's really good to see the support of these projects regarding consent fees and such like. I see there's a total expenditure of 33,371 and an overall budget of 50 grand, so it's approximately 16 grand underspent. Why is that? And is there a process to address it? You know, bearing in mind that I'm sure there are, you know, is it a communication issue? I'm sure there are other projects out there that would appreciate support.
Yeah, so probably 2 parts to that one. Some of those applications will still be in progress. So they've been approved for the funding partway through the financial year, but they'll carry on through. So some of that 16,000 will be being spent. It just hasn't carried through into that reporting just yet. We do communicate the fund, and we will be putting out more information around that. But I guess for us, it is looking at any opportunity to talk about this and with the applicants, and Alex can speak to how we do that. But yeah, we do media releases on websites. So again, happy to do more, but it's just making sure we hit the right mark with what we do.
Thank you.
Yeah, so we have a lot of pre-apps lodged at council, and that is definitely a time where we can discuss the fund with potential applicants. Another way we're doing it is talking to key stakeholders who are out on the ground dealing with applicants, potentially doing environmental enhancement work. And then also the catchment advisor team, we let them know when they're out on site seeing anything like this to really promote it as well, in the compliance team too. So anyone who's out in the field, we try and get them to talk about it.
Cool. Thank you.
Great report and really great work being done in the community. The question I have is the applicants both the Dunedin City Council, which I presume is on behalf of the community board, which isn't an entity and therefore needs to use council, but also Hawkesburn Station Limited. To my mind, they don't necessarily meet the criteria. The question is whether we should be changing the status and given that they're really, I'm sure they're good applicants, but the criteria says to qualify for fees, support the application for consent must be lodged by a not-for-profit individual organisation. And I'm just wondering whether Dunedin City Council really represents a resident and ratepayers group, and who the limited company is, and would they qualify? I'm happy that we broaden the criteria to ensure that they can be done. Does that make sense, that question?
So I think the Dunedin City Council, when they applied on behalf of a community group, it was,
Community board, yeah.
I think it was a community group.
Okay,
So
okay. Okay.
so that was just, you know, we try where we can to facilitate a way for that support to be given. And in that case, because of the arrangements around where they were planting and the group behind it, that was the way that one was facilitated. So we trying to be as pragmatic as we can. I don't know the details of the other one. I know, I understand your point, Madam. We do, we have specifically put that in the policy when it was developed. But obviously if cases arise where there's a reason for a particular applicant, then we would assess that very carefully because we need to make sure we are compliant with the policy. But there are different circumstances in terms of who might end up being the applicant.
Oh, and I'm really happy. I actually want to make sure that we broaden this, and I can either do it by adding to the list, because we're changing the policy, let's do it once. So I can either change it from the criteria in 5, or I can add the word instead of and in bold at the bottom of the list on page 2 to or. And if or they must be able to demonstrate the activity will deliver an environmental enhancement service. And in which case we can just broaden it. It's only because we're changing the policy that I'm asking the question. I'm not being critical. I'm glad that the work's happened.
No, I think it's a really good point. I think if we added an or, it would definitely enable the additional people to use the fund.
The fact that we have to get groups like the council to apply for funding, which is problematic in itself, when actually we just want the work done, I'd rather make sure that I'm sure you're going to use the delegation sensibly, and I really want to enhance the environment rather than those problematic things. So I'm really happy. I'm happy to add that as a additional motion as part of those webinars.
Sorry, Kay, whereabouts was that, paragraph?
Page 2, there's criteria, 5 criteria is a ... and goes into page, there's 4 dots on top of page 2,
Okay.
and then the word and, you could put
It's not
or.
page 2 though. It's
Yeah, it is,
pa-
yeah.
on your diligent page. which is
14.
on-
Oh,
Page 39 of
Yeah.
sorry,
Yeah, that's right.
39, section 5 of the policy
Oh, you're in
on
the policy,
criteria.
yeah.
And then also section 6 on page 40.
Yeah.
The 3 bullet points near the bottom.
Yeah, so there'd be addition of 2 ors on that page.
thank you.
Just on that note, I was just gonna follow up and ask. So touch on my DCC was an applicant because they're coming in the group, but why was Hawkesburn
They didn't
put through?
I think it's because they could prove that there was an environmental enhancement. I think the addition of the or will allow that to easily go through, but I think it was considered when the application was lodged that it met the fund due to environmental enhancement.
And that consent was just for that environmental.
Yes, it
enhancement,
was
or
just for the
it-
willow removal, yeah.
Well, I saw a couple of hands up, so go to Councillor Somerville, but and then, yeah.
Thank you. Look, similarly around the criteria, I had a question. I see there've been a couple of people in the fund receiving money on sort of active transport cycling initiatives, and I just wondered if that is adequately catered for in the criteria, which doesn't specifically talk about that on page 40, where those dots are.
Yes, so I think the thing to consider when you're looking at the cycleways that were granted funding was the additional activities that may not have required consent that they were doing, for example, planting, that then do provide the environmental enhancement, but they needed consent for things like in-stream works to put the bridges in place.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
Also, just a quick follow-up on that, would we consider helping you with the consent stuff, if it was just some active transport thing and didn't have plantains or something.
So that's not the policy direction today. It's been very clear that the funding made available was for environmental enhancement, so that would need a different paper and different consideration.
Cool. Councillor Robertson.
Mine's sort of a procedural type one, which is around the recommendations B and C, and just wondering whether, maybe it's just me, but the wording of them seems a little bit unusual, that it adopts the recommended changes and then it notes that the adopted policy changes will also be referred to the full council for final approval. I think normally we recommend that the council endorses. So yeah, that both of those two are well, yeah, they're worded incorrectly, I think. But sorry, it's probably, yeah, unless it was a question on whether there's a reason that we worded that way.
Yeah, we can, and we just used what was in place last time, so apologies that wasn't up to speak with what is currently happening.
Thanks, yeah.
Cool. Alright, we will
Yeah.
work on that in the background. But I've saw a couple of hands up. Was that Councillor McCall?
I just had a quick question just for myself, when we were talking about the criteria. Can you just, of the changing the and to or whatever, what section was that on exactly? So section 5 on page 39.
Yeah, section 6 on page 40. I'll bring it over.
I've got no problem.
Yeah, we may take the opportunity to turn the bullet points into A's and B's, which would assist with the sections if that's considered appropriate as part of this.
Very good idea.
Do we have any other questions? Is that another one? Them? Look,
Oh, no, I'll just think.
I saw one pop up over here, Councillor Scott.
Is there any recommended changes? Is it going to be put up on the screen?
Yep, I can do that.
So it's clear?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm happy to move A and C, but with B being that the staff report back to council with the updated changes, because I think it's been a helpful discussion, but we don't need to do them today because it is going to council anyway.
Yeah, well, if you want to move that, someone wants to.
Sorry.
Oh, no, if that doesn't help.
Finish.
Just adjourn for 5 minutes, we'll just tidy this up.
Sorry.
That's right. It needs to be accurate.
Yes, I'll just ask a question in the meantime.
Okay.
And we've got.
I was gonna say, you've got two issues in
Yeah,
one.
yeah.
But has there been any staff thought to doing this, this funding within that general environmental funding package that we're sort of looking at approaching?
So yes, so we are looking at options to bring for that funding discussion around year 2 through to council in terms of workshops and papers, and this is listed as one of our current funding streams and will be considered through there in terms of what this money goes to and what that looks like.
Councillor Nicole.
I've got a question just around the and or we continuing down that path. Can you give me some clarity as to the definition of commercial gain?
Yeah, they're not making a profit.
Yeah. But no commercial gain would be relating to the fact that the application are lodging wouldn't cause commercial gain for the applicant. It would be specifically relating to environmental enhancement rather than for them to make money in some way.
The gain may be a gain in asset value as opposed to cash fee as well. I'm pretty concerned that this is just come out today because we're talking about opening up this fund for private.
So it has come up, this isn't a policy established, I think, even last long-term plan. Yeah, so it's been in place. What we've tried to do is create a policy that enables us to be pragmatic in our conversations with applicants. If the risk if we tried to nail it down absolutely is we'd end up with just an unwieldy policy that no one would be able to navigate, and we'd end up not providing any support. The commercial piece is around being very clear that the project being undertaken is not for a direct commercial gain, i.e., build something and then charge people to come and see it. We appreciate there are complexities in that gain space around asset values, around land values, around, there might be a number of things. But we are looking at ultimately the environmental benefit of that particular project. And the direction we got from council at the time was can we provide a fund to enable those projects? We had a few instances where the cost of the consenting process was clearly an impediment to people undertaking wetland restoration, stream bank restoration, planting, whatever that may have been. So that's the background to the policy that's been in place for the last 3 years.
Right, I'm gonna move that we adjourn for, you got a question?
Yeah,
First?
I have a question. So, look, I just think this concept, since we brought it for the last long-term plan, is working really, really well, and it's good to see we've just want to tweak it. But what my question is, and I just looked at there at Eckholds Pond up in the mighty Waitaki. That's a really great community facility, and they're doing a lot of environmental enhancement with that project. But where are we actually publicising the fact that we've done this? And unless I've missed it, this is a real good story, and even if, and I would say not just to the ODT, but something a feature in the Oamaru Mail, which goes to the whole Waitaki district. That sort of stuff that ORC are doing something quite special. And even the smaller ones, I'm not limiting that to size, but the intent is that's our key role, to ensure we're getting environmental enhancement, and these projects are doing that.
Yeah, so we've got a media release plan to go out about this, but take the point that when there's specific ones that come up, we could look to spotlight those. So that's good feedback for us in terms of knowing that. But certainly media releases planned and to speak to some of the great things that these groups have been doing and individuals have been doing.
Yeah, and probably your thought there of doing it more regularly as each one comes up, if there is significant, especially if they're in different areas that we don't normally communicate in, will be spot on.
And I was also thinking that it would be good to have a section in the website under the consent fund of an example kind of area of applications that have gone through the process.
Right. Thank you.
Alrighty, I will move that we adjourn for 5 minutes. If anyone wants to second that, Councilor Noonan second that, all in favour? Aye. Alrighty, we'll get back underway. You just want to check that there aren't any final questions to staff before I get Kate to move. What's on the board? Anyone else wants to Kat's on the call?
Can we just get some background on what you come to? I just walked in because it's different. to
Yeah,
when we-
yeah, so we'll walk through it once.
No, we walk through it, then we can have questions once we understand.
Yeah. Sweet, shall we, yeah, we'll just look through this then. Would you just run us through the changes?
So the changes are partly to do with make sure we reflect the delegations of this committee, which there aren't, so it needs to come back through council, but the committee supports the recommended changes, and so they were the ones that were already proposed around job titles. There's minor grammatical errors, but also that minor amendment to the criteria in section 5 that was raised, which is an and to an or, which just provides that flexibility to ensure that we can be what we've heard around the table, that we can be pragmatic and not get tripped up by the policy. So that's the changes, and then notes that we do need to bring this back for approval of council. We can't have the policy signed off, so the final policy would come back to full council.
Alright, questions on?
Well, I'm just wondering why you've got, and that minor change policy proposed is still in the motion. It should stop at financial year. So that's why I'm saying you've mixed two different issues here. You're noting,
Oh, sorry, number 1, yeah, notice the updated consent receipt.
so all of the, all the words
Yeah,
after year should
sorry,
go.
you're right, Michael, sorry, I hadn't
Yeah.
looked, I was only looking at 2 and 3, so after financial year, delete the rest of that first
Yeah.
one. Apologies.
Any other questions on the, Scott, and then the call?
Yeah, I don't know if it's necessarily a question, but I'd just like to say that I do have some reservations here. So I think what you're basically saying by or is that that if a company does have commercial gain, that it can sidestep and potentially use this fund. Am I correct in that? So maybe that's my question. So is this opening it up for entities with commercial gain?
Can I respond to that? I think the wording that Richard has chosen here is delicate enough that we don't focus on the or, that we focus on the fact that the criteria needs to change slightly to broaden it. And what comes back to us in the council paper may be an or maybe something else. We've already heard there may be A, B, C's, D's. I think that the thing is that we want to make sure that we're not stopping a good environmental outcome by the nature of the applicant. I think that the commercial stuff, I mean, bearing in mind that this came out of a commercial project that I think Lloyd was heavily involved in, and we got a lot of criticism about not being providing for a farmer developing a wetland that was a very public place. I think that we just have to trust in the staff being really careful about that. That all of this came out of that project, and a brilliant project which I enjoy driving past regularly and very publicly available on a side road.
Yeah, well,
Hang on,
my
mixing questions.
yeah, my question,
from Ryan.
That's why I was
Mr. Chair, is that instead of putting down a minor amendment to the criteria in section 5, which I actually, I don't know, Joe Public, struggle to understand that if somebody wants to change the policy, that they should articulate what they're trying to achieve, and I think Kate's had a go at that, and whatever those words are, need to be put up there so we can debate them and agree them, as opposed to a minor amendment. That is not necessarily minor.
I'm leaving it to council.
So I'm not sure if that, so if I take I'm not really sure exactly what the question is, but Ryan, your point around, the point around it is that the key one in there is that the policy will have to come back to council with an explanation of the changes made in order for it to be approved.
Yeah.
So there is this is the first step through the regional leadership committee, because this is where we bring our regulatory program, and this is relating to our regulatory program. Well, that's broader than that. The key thing in there is that any amendments are going to have to be brought to council and explained to enable that debate before it's approved, because this doesn't approve the policy.
Yeah, I just want the council to, explain exactly what they mean. If it was me, I would have a fourth recommendation in there, that consideration be given to opening up the consent fee to commercial projects that actually have a significant community and environmental gain.
I'm moved it, yeah, I've moved it.
Where
Just
to go
gonna-
like that, so we can actually understand what we've agreed.
I
If
second
you
it.
want to move that, you
I
can, but
second
I've got a motion from Kate that,
I second it as is.
yeah, Kate, so Kate's motion.
Yeah.
I did just have a question from councillor McCall that I'll go to quickly and then I'll
I just
get
want,
you.
oh, sorry, thank you, Chair. I just, can I ask, so, section 2, is the last sentence being put in and minor grammatical errors and minor amendment criteria, section 5, is that an addition?
Sorry.
Is that an addition to the original one?
Yes.
Sport 2.
It's an amendment to the original section, the original
Cool.
recommendation 2. Because we have what Kate was moving is that minor change to the criteria in section 5. So that reflects the request from the mover.
So, so my question is, at what stage does something become a minor grammatical error or amendment or a significant one? In my opinion, we're talking a significant change in policy direction. And I think I don't believe, my question is that change that's been put in to support the last piece, is that not covered in 3, where it says we're preempting by 2, is that not covered in 3, that the staff come back with an updated policy? Because this is basically updating the policy on the fly.
No, this is setting direction. And I'll let the mover discuss the wording around minor or not, but the process here is giving direction from the committee to staff to bring back a full paper for approval. So it doesn't confirm anything.
Do you want to touch anything on minor?
No, I'm happy to delete the word minor, although I don't think it has any effect. The issue here is our staff being able to give money out for a consent to get an environmental outcome. I'm not focusing on the commercial because I didn't really ask for any changes on that. And so I'm not actually putting the amendment in here because I think the staff should go and consider it rather. It isn't in there, it's just asking to check that when we give money out, that we're safeguarded from giving it out to potentially a commercial entity or potentially a council, which isn't in there at the moment, so that no one can come back and say, actually, it was wrong, because the outcome is what we want to focus on. It's about the environment and let's get the best result.
Happy to support the movers to change that word to an amendment.
Right.
Taking out the word minor,
Minor has
changing
been
part to an.
Struck from that, can I just confirm that?
Yeah.
Yeah, mine is struck and that has been moved and seconded. Do we have any discussion on the motion that has moved those 3 recommendations?
We start questions first.
Question, well,
Questions.
yeah, we've done questions, but if it's a clarification.
My question
Yeah.
is, does this mean, and I just want to get it clear in my head, because this is all I just come to the meeting like out of the blue. Does this mean that all environmental initiatives that require consent that is not a tradable commodity would be open to get, to go through this consenting process?
My amendment only relates to the person who can apply for the funding. It doesn't relate to the project. And that is where I think there's been some unnecessary obfuscation of the whole issue. It's just a very minor amendment, but it protects the staff and ensures that groups can just get something done with bank account.
So it's a clarification, so this is so I understand the consent has to be held by land owner, I guess. So what you're I haven't got it clear in my mind what the ramifications are, put it
And
that
that's
way.
why I've asked the staff to come back.
Yeah.
That's in this, what we put in 2 sections.
Point of clarification.
Councillor McCall.
under our current policy, is it correct that the DCC should not have been able to get a consent under this fund? And what we're trying to do is
It's a great.
ensure that very good consideration be given to that type of entity to ensure these projects go ahead.
It's probably a bit more than a point of clarification.
Go and ask that question. I think it was a better question.
We've moved out of question time into debate, but that's the essence of it.
Thank you.
All right, councillor Mason.
Can I clarify that this policy is about a fund of $50,000? Well, what on earth are we talking about this for, and or? Come on, let's move on.
I'll take that as a discussion point. Since we had a discussion, do we have anyone else wishing to speak for or against these motions or this motion of these recommendations? Okay, I have councillor McCall and then councillor Scott.
Happy to debate now. I'll support the motion because at the end of the day, it's creating pathways for environmental improvements. And I think it's all about number 3, notes that we're going to get an updated paper that just may expand the funding criteria to enable a greater participation. So I'll be supporting the motion. So it's just a clarification that I was after. Thank you.
Right, let's go.
I just make the point that it may only be 50 grand, but as Lloyd said, this fund originated from the issues around the Waipahi wetland consent. And if you look at each individual one, this support for the consent fee can be the make or break of whether this project, these community projects, can actually start or not. So it's actually a critical fund, and ideally it's not consumed by, for example, supporting the consent fee for a wastewater, community, a town wastewater scheme or individual entity sediment trap if a consent's required. It's all about the balance, because we all want environmental outcomes, but this is actually getting ones that can't start above the line. And some of the others just need a bit of encouragement and have more financial ability. Thank you.
Do we have anyone else wishing to speak? Would the movers and seconders like to reply?
Look, I just congratulate the staff on the work they've done in the last 12 months in getting these applications processed and through. Look, I can see there's going to be great environmental gain, and to use a bit of flexibility within that policy to ensure that those people have been granted those consents are very, very well done. And I'm sure we can continue on and make this a really even more worthwhile part of the ORC function. Well done.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, sorry, I'm sort of asked after I spoke with you on reply, but I just want to affirm that this is a really good initiative. We should be, as an organisation, removing any of the hurdles that we ourselves create for those community groups and stuff doing their good work, and this is a good way of doing that. So I will put the motion. All in favour?
Aye.
All against? Motion carried. Wonderful. Alrighty, so that brings us 9.3, where we have the flood and drainage schemes liaison groups discussion. And a few staff members joining us at the other end of the table. And we have a proposed draft terms of reference there and approach outlined. Establishing the flood and drainage scheme liaison groups.
Michelle will join us.
Oh, cool. Yeah, so we've Matt and Michelle.
With the level 0. Yeah. People talk.
So, thanks for coming in, guys. I will hand it over to, you two and Richard to preface the paper. Get the way.
Thanks, Elliot. So this is a paper that's come direct from resolutions made during the long-term plan to establish community liaison group within the flood and drainage scheme. Tom Dyer, since the first July has picked this up, has had a couple of meetings with submitters that we have heard from regularly over the last few years, and who were active in that meeting that we had an outram just to ensure that we had discussed the approach and it was supported by them. So that's been positively received. I've had a conversation with the community board chair, just as a heads up that this paper was coming. You'll note that it is all notes. That's because there's no delegations to this committee. And what we're doing is bringing back, as requested, an outline of how we're looking to establish these groups, including the draft terms of reference. There will need to be a formal paper to council, because you will need to sign off on the terms of reference, and you will need to, if you choose to, appoint a member formally to the group. Although we've indicated in there we don't think it should prevent councillors from attending. But I think our recommendation is it would be wise to appoint someone to that group as a council representative formally, and that will need to be through a paper that we will bring back. So that's where we've got to. We're looking to get it established, and you'll note in the paper that's using community meeting, similar to what was held during the long-term plan, where this issue was discussed and raised by a number of people, and gather their ideas, and then establish the group formally through a council resolution.
Was there anything you guys wanted to give us a heads up on around the paper before I open up to questions?
Thank you, Richard. Basically, it is an learning paper. Quite keen to hear your feedback around the approach, any views on the terms of reference, and anything else that you may think is not sort of missing, or timelines or whatever, really.
We have an encouragement for feedback in the discussion section of the paper. But in the meantime, I have questions from Councillor Laws and Councillor Scott. Is that a hand up, Helen, as well?
Oh, and maybe the discussion.
Cool. Councillor Laws.
Two things. Sections 26 and 27 of your report.
Sorry.
Just your microphone. It's just so people can hear us online.
Section 26 and 27 of the report relating to the terms of reference and the informality stressed of the liaison groups. Terms of reference, it's fine. We'll get those coming back, presumably at a council meeting. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. When are you anticipating that council meeting to be?
So it will depend on the timeline to pull the community together, and to appoint the community representatives. I would hope that we have this established before the end of the year. But it will be subject to getting that meeting and getting those representatives confirmed.
Okay. Can I ask, are the terms of reference going to be the same for all of them? I mean, the reason I say that is because you're seeking essentially for feedback from the community to programs or initiatives that the Otago Regional Council are going to undertake. That would seem quite a broad term of reference, wouldn't it? I mean, it's not going to be anything other than that. I note, and also that these are informal bodies, so they are not decision-making bodies. They are essentially communication channels. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. So we shouldn't be stressing over any of this, really. Is that right?
I don't know what you might stress about. Preferences to what you choose to stress about. But what I
this
would
isn't
say,
at the forefront of my mind.
no, what I would say is that we have heard that the community would highly value the opportunity to re-establish these groups and be able to feed in. I think, yes, the communication piece, you're right, that is effectively what they are there. They're a mechanism for communication and for us to have more regular contact with a group that can help represent the thoughts of the wider or those within the scheme and broader community. So we're not proposing that it is a decision-making body. I think that needs to be retained by this table.
Okay, and finally, you've got a recommendation here. The general meeting of scheme ratepayers will presumably choose who's going to be on those particular liaison groups. What do you mean? What's a general meeting of scheme ratepayers? Does that mean the people who are levied, the general community who are levied anyhow through their rates? Can I get an indication of that, please?
Thank you for the question. What it means with the general meeting is to stand this up, there would be a general community meeting for those three schemes, and it would be those ratepayers in those schemes that would nominate their representatives.
Ratepayers or residents or both?
It could be both. It could be both.
So presumably that's our decision to make, yeah?
Correct.
Yeah, okay. Cool, thank you.
Bring our membership back as part of the terms of reference.
Yeah.
I have Councillor Scott followed by Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting point that Michael has brought up there. I'm looking at attachment A, table of proposed minimum representation. So I think we're seeking up to 10 people. First, I think, the liaison group, I'm fully supportive of this and what's happening here. Yeah, I see the attachment A in terms of the Taieri liaison group as a key. So it's a minimum of 2 representing East Taieri, minimum of 2 West Taieri, Dunedin Airport and the community board. So we're going to have a community meeting, but of course, some of the members will be determined outside of that meeting, the representative of the airport, the representative of the community board and the RRC councillor. So it's really just between the minimum of 4 East Taieri and West Taieri. How will that be handled? You might turn up to a meeting, there's no representatives potential from East Taieri or from West Taieri, or how is that aspect going to be handled?
Thanks, Councillor Scott. This is just a draft. It's not a prescriptive table.
Yeah.
So it's just a suggestion for discussion.
Yeah.
In terms of if there is a setting of representation for East, West and other representatives, as long as the quorum's met, the meeting can proceed. But really, that's the kind of obligation, accountability of having a liaison group, that you have appropriate attendance.
No, that's
So,
not what I'm
Brian,
talking about.
so in terms of establishing the group, your first point, I would be shocked if we didn't have a large number of representatives from both of those areas looking to join the group. It's a possibility. But I don't think that will be an issue. So
Yeah, but it's still something that has to be managed.
it has to be managed, and then I think it's. I'll just go back through and have a refresh. But effectively, by running that meeting, we enable the community amongst themselves to determine the representatives that will sit on that group from those schemes, and that could be as simple as nominations, and if it needs to be a vote, it can be an informal vote. It's trying to enable it to be community led. Is effectively what we're aiming for. So not putting too many rules and regulations on it. Having a meeting, explaining the purpose, explaining the draft, and gathering some feedback, and then enabling the community to lead the appointment of people that sit on that group to represent them.
No, that's good. I think my main point is that table, like it's way back in the terms of reference, but it's a key table, and the body of the report and the body of the meeting and how the liaison group will work. Thank you.
Councillor Wilson.
I should be exceedingly happy to see this report. I think it's 4 or 5 years in the making, from when I first proposed something along these lines and was, didn't ever get quite traction. So thank you very much for delivering something. I do have a question, and then I will go into why my slight regrets about this at the moment as well. The question I have is, my understanding from having attended many of the meetings out there is, and I just want to check that it's covered in your understanding of terms of reference, is having input into what the work program looks like, and not influencing, but just ticking off projects as they get put into the work program as being the priority for that community, delivering what they think of flood protection is needed, and even putting up the debate points that maybe they can't come to consensus because that may be the issue. I couldn't quite get in there that whether it was going to influence the work programs into the annual and long-term plans, and whether I'm missing that.
So once it's established, purpose of liaison group, bullet point 3, feedback on proposed scheme, operational capital programs, bullet 4, levels of service, bullet 5, development and infrastructure strategy, asset management plans, and rating funding relevant to the scheme.
Okay, I was looking in the other stuff, sorry.
Just on that too, Councillor Wilson, the intent, and certainly particularly with the Waitaki Rating District Liaison Group, is the reason for the 2 meetings is the second meeting that would occur in 2025 happens when we're setting the annual plan for year 2. So the community gets to have a look at our priorities, which will be driven by the asset management plan and the risk register, and the inputs and the debate around what the community feels priorities, and having the ability to understand why risk profiles are different, and dictating annual plans is why we'd be having that second meeting.
Right, thank you. I must have read too many other things. Look, the other question I have, and I don't want to set up something for failure, but we've got a paper this afternoon which couldn't have been worse timed, to commit to the next 3 years for this group to a large project in council. And I'm just wary that we're setting ourselves up using this as a template almost, and then taking away a lot of the input they can have in the next year's budgets by confirming this afternoon to do that. Is that a concern to you, or is there substantially more money in the pocket budget and I don't quite understand the budgets?
So I'll take that, Kate. So it's a circumstance of time is the simple answer. So there has been opportunities, albeit not for this group, to feed in through the long-term plan process, and there were a number of submissions and on both or from people within that scheme. The paper this afternoon, which we will discuss this afternoon, is part of a process that has been going on outside of, and the timing is what it is, and a decision needs to be made. There is nothing that would prevent this. The purpose of this group moving forward, once it's been established, is to ensure that there is good opportunity for this group to influence the program, both operational and capital, understand the funding required, and all of the things that are set out in the terms of reference. But it's the paper this afternoon is an entirely separate matter, and we can explain the reasons why when we get to that point.
Alrighty, I had Mr. Langsbury.
Hi, kia ora. Within the paper, it talks about participation by mana whenua and engagement with Ōkaha and Te Ao Marama. And then when I'm looking at attachment A and table of proposed minimum representation, there's no mana whenua listed in there. I'm just wanting to understand where the odds on that come from.
As I said before, it was a draft table. It wasn't meant to be exclusive. We also don't have other infrastructure owners or authorities listed in there. But we do make a very strong point that we do see it as an expectation in the liaison group.
Yeah, sorry, Hawani, it's my error in reviewing it. It says in paragraph 30 appropriate to offer a place, and then it's not carried through. So
And my concern is it's not that you're being stealthy and not wanting to write that down, have it clear that mana whenua is probably going to be on this group. that it's probably good to ensure that transparency is
Yeah.
listed there right from the beginning.
I think the other one to note, and it is that point is made there too, is there might be a different preference for engagement on future work plans and how mana whenua would like to engage. And that's a question we've got to ask. So we'll go through that process and make sure that whether it's liaison group or a different mechanism, but yeah, that should have been carried through and transcribed into that table.
No, all good. It was just clarification, right?
But I can confirm that's something that would get carried through, when that eventually comes to the council. Yeah, cool. And then I had
Yeah.
Councillor McCall.
Thank you, Chair. I had the same question as Wani. But also, do we need to be approaching the local runanga as well, as opposed to just?
We approach them through Okara Te Aomata, so that's the avenue for us.
So that's all happening. I've got 2 or 3 questions, if that's all right. It's just really around the structure or the intent of the group. I think it's really awesome and it's, going in the right direction. Some of the stuff I don't, and I see it's not limited to the 10, but 10 seem like a really small number for a community group, recognising that often people can't attend meetings. So I probably think the group could be expanded wider than 10, but there's a provision to enable to do that, which is very good. Another one was, my question was there any consideration given to residents that live outside the current targeted rating areas? So like residents like maybe in the Wingatui or up across in the Mangatuas who would have come down. Is there any thought as to whether we might we may need some viewpoints from there, have them included in the group as well, as opposed to seems to be relatively confined. And the other one, and probably my main question, is the intent. So just reading through the terms of reference, it seems that the intention is to have open public community board type style meetings, as opposed to what I would think would be a meeting whereby you have your liaison groups and get in behind the scenes and talk free and frankly with within the group, all the members of the group, including the staff, which may not be public facing. It's just that, because this is like 7 and 8 in terms of reference.
Okay, yes, it is heading in the right direction, since it was disestablished. And to take up direct engagement. The reason I say that is that it's part of the answer to your third question. In terms of the public who are not part of the appointed committee, there is provision through item 10, a draft in terms of reference. When people want to speak, they can submit on that, because we would be advertising liaison groups, and it'd be no different to any other kind of, arrangement like that. In terms of direct engagement, where free and frank discussions need to be held with staff and or councillors or ELT, that occurs now. But the purpose of the liaison group is to set up some standing communications that allows the community to be heard together around their work programs, priorities, risk, how we're working through it together. It doesn't preclude that there wouldn't be other forums as we need it to talk about specific issues. Is that helpful or no?
The way it's worded, it would enable members of the public to attend if there was an interest in what was being discussed. And I suppose the reason we put that in the draft to discuss when we meet with the group is transparency, essentially, and enables people to come along and listen. And as per 7 and on page 59, 10, page 59, within those, that there's an opportunity to speak, but it would have to be the chair that agrees to that. So the liaison group is the liaison group, and I think that will effectively become the body that moves forward. But what we're proposing is that it does enable other people to attend, to watch those liaison group meetings, which would just add to the transparency of process and hopefully wouldn't take away from the ability to have robust conversations. You should be able to have those anyway. And then the other thing that's proposed in there is a meeting every year that isn't in a full public meeting advertised. It just enables the chair to summarise what's happened during the year, what feedback the liaison groups had, and what positions been taken on certain things. So that's referred to in. Sorry. There is their meeting.
I think maybe the way I was reading it that all meetings of the liaison group would be full public meetings.
One
So,
general meeting of the public. The other ones,
yeah.
meetings of the liaison group are open for people to attend. That's our starting point.
Public, but not for the public.
Yeah, our view's been that if people want to come along, then obviously the chair will need to control the meeting. But we've heard that closed door meetings sometimes raise concerns. So that's the position where we want to discuss that with the community, and then we want to bring it back to this table. But that's the starting point that we've gone with.
Yeah. That's fine. I'll just questions. The other one, number 12, the quorum of 4. I was thinking 4 is quite a small number, particularly when you've got the ability to increase your committee to the right fit. I would think it would be better to have a percentage as opposed to an actual number, because at the end of the day, the 4 can be made up of your regional council and your community board and the airport and one other. So I just think that quorum is probably a little bit too small to have a meaningful big, and your EV reps, people from the EV as well. So I just think that's a wee bit too tight. I think we just need to try and keep it as open as possible so that it can develop rather than the trouble when sometimes you get your terms of references, they get too tight and you put numbers and stuff in. Yeah.
So the question is, can we consider that? The answer is yes.
Absolutely. I think staff will take that on board, but obviously if you want to move a amendment or anything you can, but in this time, but it will be coming back to us with all this feedback taken on board. I have a couple of questions from the side as well, but I just quickly wanted to ask around in terms of the number 9 in the terms of reference, talk about the liaison group chair and the nominated substitute. I just wanted to clarify that nominated substitute would be an existing member of the liaison group. Yeah, cool. Okay, thanks. Thank you.
Thank you. What is the formal ownership of the liaison groups linked to the ORC? So is it a group that has formal, like if you were drawing a flowchart of ORC committees, would there be a line between, say, this committee and then to this group? Or is it a group that sits totally in isolation of the ORC? Like, is it going to be supported by staff? The meetings are going to be managed by staff. The information that is, the detail, the discussions will be flowed back to the ORC, or does it all sit ring fenced within the group, and then whoever is unfortunately appointed chair gets to do everything?
No, so we've noted in there, it will be supported by staff in terms of we'd make sure that minutes can be taken, that meetings can be advertised, that content's loaded onto the website, whatever that might be. It's not being formed as a formal council committee. So I would, its purpose is engagement, or targeted and more intensive engagement. So you could put a dotted line from the group to council or to safety and resilience. You could put it to a number of committees. It'll be finance for the LTP. It'll be this one for engagement. So there's a number of ways it will feed in, but its purpose is targeted engagement. What we don't want to do is create the group and then make it onerous for the people that are members of that group by effectively doing what you say, here's the group and that. So we will be providing it some support, but we already do have staff in Michelle's team working out in those areas that attend these types of meetings. This is just bringing a bit more structure to it as requested by the community.
And it will report direct to council, or will it direct report to one of our committees?
Oh, it depends what the issue is. As I say, if it's feeding into long-term plan, it might come through the finance committee as a piece of feedback. If it's safety and resilience, sorry, it would come back through in terms of an update from meetings. So it could report anywhere, but it would be captured as feedback from the liaison group. And it would depend on what the matter is and where the paper's going. So I wouldn't limit it to one committee or full council. I think there'd be a number of ways we can use the liaison group.
Thank you.
We've indicated that, Councillor Callaghan, that, through 9, having that ability to report through to the Safety and Resilience Committee annually is also another avenue to sort of have that feedback and progress on how the liaison group's going.
Good on. Thank you. Yeah.
I would be very worried if all of a sudden we started getting an unwieldy large group of people. And if I take the example of a group that is working exceptionally well, which is the Lower Waitaki one, where we have a group of that liaison groups, well, I've been there for 5 years now, I suppose, but they have their public meetings, and then there is a group outside that is in constant talk with Ray Tarrant or the operations people. They appraise the budget for the year. It just works really, really well. But Gert van het Kloos, who's the chair, is often seen up and down the Waitaki River with different people of that group working on the process. Look, just don't make this too unwieldy to operate, and the openness is key, but you only need, the chairman will be calling the meeting, and if you've got 7 people on, he'll want 4 people there, and so it's as simple as that. And if the meeting can't happen on Tuesday, they'll have it on Wednesday morning. So that's how it operates. So don't make it too unwieldy, and the public will. I should have a question here, shouldn't I? But the public will actually set what they want to be done. And is it the intent of your graft as a public representative, being the Mosgiel Tory Community Board member, who will represent the views of those outside the ratepayer base?
Possibly,
yes. Yeah, that's an example. I'd like to throw a question.
Thanks, that's not daring that into a question there.
Well, it's just, I'm sorry, but Lower Waitaki works very well. They help set the budgets, they go through it well, and everyone's well informed, so.
So Councillor Malcolm, we did, I agree with you, it does. We did look to that liaison group, which we participate in, and we also looked across other regional council liaison groups. So, this is why it's on the draft. We'll go to the community. It'll be driven by what they need. I wanted to touch on part of that first meeting will be standing up the type of format of information and having the community look at how they want to see that budgets and programming, and being able to sort of get something that's palatable and that they can sort of relate to.
Thank you.
Cool. Do we have any other questions for staff on the paper? Mr. Lang, sorry.
Not sure if this is a question. I'm just thinking about the Tairi, and we have the Waipori Waihola Wetlands Complex out there. Formerly, when it had a technical committee, and I'm not sure how you go about identifying who should be part of these liaison groups, but whether the now Sinclair Wetlands Trust chair should be identified as a person that should be on that group separate to Mana Whenua. Really just flagging that as an observation. Thanks.
That recently struck your Michael.
Well done.
Look, I'd be happy to amend this, to move these motions with one minor amendment if this is the appropriate moment.
I'll just double check. There's no more questions for staff. Otherwise, I will hand it over to Councillor Small to run through
Yeah, well, look, we've had a little bit of discussion about whether we're talking just ratepayers or ratepayers and residents, and I guess would like to move this with the suggestion that we amend the recommendation C to say through a general meeting of scheme ratepayers and residents, because it's not only ratepayers who are the interested people, even though they do have a particular special interest in the matter.
Cool. Would anyone like to second moving that? I'm happy to if not, I just want to. Yeah, Councillor Forbes. Cool. So we have a mover and seconder for that. Is that simpler? That we don't need to chuck that up on the screen or anything. Just adding and residents at the end of C. Yeah, cool. Would anyone like to speak for or against the motion?
Happy to do that as the mover. Thank you. Look, I'm very pleased to see this here. So thank you everyone who's been involved. We know we've had a lot of community wish for this to be established, and so that it has come quite promptly as really. It's also, seems to me, an indication of the ORC really looking for effective ways to engage with the community. And though we're talking about an initial group here for the Taieri, the suggestion that that could be used in other places too, is really helpful. And let's see, no doubt there will be some experimentation as this develops, but I think this is a very positive move. And again, showing how we are being responsive to that community wish that came here. I did note that amendment. We're not only talking ratepayers, of course, we want to look at the community more broadly, so including residents in there is a good thing too. Thanks.
Ready? Would anyone like something? Yeah, Councillor Wilson.
I'm delighted to see this, and I shouldn't be, but I am really disappointed that about this afternoon's paper, and I do want to link them together, and I don't appreciate probably staff don't. This afternoon, we're committing to a project in this area for $9 million, which is over 3 years. And I couldn't think of a worse time to set up a liaison group without giving them a say. And I'm going to support this now on the basis that we have to do something slightly different this afternoon in order to ensure that we're not gazumping the liaison groups in their tracks by committing to such a substantial project. And I mean, it's unfortunate we've got in this space, and I don't know what the answer is. I think we've got some clever thinking to think about in the next few hours of how we can ensure we get a positive response to this. It's been a long time in the making, and yet we are going out and doing something this afternoon which will frustrate some of those people greatly. So I hope, yeah, I'm supporting it on the basis that we do something different this afternoon. It's in the papers. I don't know what it is yet. It's about giving this liaison group at least a heads up about what that paper is and influence, because if we don't, then we might as well not do what we're about to do.
Councillor.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. I think this will, these liaison group promotion and will ultimately provide a more worthy mechanism, I think, for these ratepayers and householders or residents who want to know a bit more detail and can have those conversations in a forum that's not quite as intimidating as the one that's here. And what I can recall, and I'm obviously focusing pretty much on the Taieri flood and drainage scheme here, because we've probably had more conversations with those ratepayers and residents than with the exception probably of the Waitaki one. But what I can gather is often they need to know the sort of the rats and mice, often to drill down into some of these budgets to fully understand, you know, why their rates are heading in a certain direction. So to be able to have those discussions in a forum such as what they're promoting, with a framework of the terms of reference, it seems to me, as I say, a really worthy mechanism and a really positive step forward. And in fact, we're stepping back to the past to a certain degree, which is I think so you need to do that from time to time. So yeah, very pleased that we're here discussing it.
Councillor Robertson.
others have said it, but yeah, it's really fantastic to be creating the liaison group and hopefully liaison groups from there as well once we've got the tidy in place initially. Yeah, as Councillor Noon has just said, we've run liaison groups in the past. And we can learn from that. We can learn from how we are working in the Taieri as well. And I think we can probably have something even more positive than we've ever had before. And we can learn, I think, from what's going to work well in the Taieri this time and adapt if we need to as well, because we may not get the model entirely right initially. But the key point is that we need to start, and we need to start somewhere. We all, I think, can recognise that. So that's really good. I definitely support the changes to residents as well as ratepayers. Everyone knows what a resident is versus a ratepayer, but if you were thinking of principal of a local school who's probably not a ratepayer but probably would want to be involved from time to time, or a share milker, for example, or something like that. There's lots of examples where perhaps you're not a direct ratepayer, but you, you want to be involved. So I think that's fair. And the other thing is just understanding the bounds of what a liaison group does. It's really, really good to have those conversations, to be able to do a deep dive into some of the details of why we're doing what we're doing, how much is it going to cost, is this affordable, all those types of things. And then also though, that there are I guess responsibilities that sit with us as the regional council, but potentially do sit with other statutory bodies as well, and that we will all need to do our jobs as well and feed into that. Liaison group will certainly get to have a big say, but we will have wider things that we need to all be thinking about as well in doing our job. So just understanding that relationship and setting that up, particularly in that first year, is going to be important too. So we all, I don't know, that we get it right and we understand what we're all needing to do our jobs. So thank you very much, staff, for ensuring that we can get to this point. Really looking forward to it.
Kia ora. I'll add that, there's ongoing work in these schemes, that these groups will help us better communicate and answer questions and hear feedback on. But there's also big open questions as to what these schemes, look like in the future, how they function. And those aren't questions that we can answer alone. And so the community's asked us for something along these lines, and it's great to see us responding to that call and providing a more local forum to have these very important discussions. And it's also just one of the many things that we're doing to build, or in some cases rebuild, trust and respect sort of in both directions with the community, which is pretty key to us functioning as well in all aspects of the organisations, and something the community deserves. So it's great to see us making progress on this. I'll just open up to see Councillor Kelleher. Okay, sure.
Actually, I think Councillor McCall might have had his hand up for me. Sorry.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, okay. I was just going to say it's really awesome to see the progress, and it's all part of the the desire of our council to connect with our communities and to listen and interface with the people that are on the ground, so that we can all work together as one. And we may not always agree with everything, but we always want to be in the room together. And so this is the start. Well, it's not the start. We're on a journey of reconnecting with our people, and we just want to continue on that journey. And this is a massive step in this zone, so in this area. So thank you very much, and I'll be fully supporting it.
So Councillor McCall,
Yeah, thank you. I'll be supporting it too. I just have a little degree of caution around the structure of it, and for those people who will sit on it, those representatives of the community, as I understand it, they won't be there representing an overall organisation that will bring a position to the liaison group. They'll be there as individuals. And so it'll be quite important that the people with the knowledge and maybe to speak for all will be selected or have themselves forward for those positions, because really 2 or 4 people are going to be speaking for entire schemes. And so I think the ability to ensure that everybody's voice is heard is still going to be an issue that as a council we will still have some wider engagement to do as well. So that was all. Thank you.
Is there anyone else wanting to speak for or against the motions? I think we've covered a lot of ground. All right, and just checking out to the mover and seconder, making sure you guys don't want to add anything else. Perfect. I will put the motion then. All in favour?
Aye.
All against? Motion carries. Perfect, and that is paper 9.3 of 3, which wraps us up with the regional leadership. I won't close off with the code here. I'll leave that to the end of the day. But hopefully someone can do a pylon for us tomorrow. But with that, I'll adjourn the meeting. Go.
So thank you.
Adjourning.
Close. Sorry, close.